So the New England Patriots are finally getting in the mix here in free agency on day one of the legal tampering period, as they are going to be signing former Washington Commanders running back Antonio Gibson to a 3-year contract. We're going to break all that down in today's video, but on the way in, make sure you guys do leave a big like on the video and subscribe to the channel while hitting the bell notification so that you get notified every single time we post a video. It's free agency, baby. You guys are not going to want to miss any time that we post a video. So before we hop into the statistics, we break down who Antonio Gibson really is. I think what a lot of you guys are going to be asking is, what do I think of this? Does this move the needle for the Patriots? And day one here with the legal tampering period, a lot of free agents are being signed, a lot of big name free agents. You have Gabe Davis signed. You look at the running back group specifically, you have Tony Pollard signed. You have Josh Jacobs signed. You have Saquon Barkley signed. There have been a lot of guys off the board. Antonio Gibson isn't that. Day one, at least so far while I'm making this video, the Patriots haven't really made any big game-changing splash moves. I would say Antonio Gibson is more of a mid-tier signing by the Patriots. He's not a guy that's going to come in and be a camp body, but he's also not an elite player that is going to move the chains and keep defensive coordinators up at night. Like I mentioned, he is signing a 3-year deal, which in itself did surprise me. I feel like under a new regime, really everywhere, it's not just offensively, but a new running backs coach, a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, a new quarterback, everything's going to be different. Why do we not see how he fits in the system first? Especially at running back, where it's very easy to get a guy if it doesn't work out. It's easy to get a guy on the open market. It's easy to trade for a guy and not have to give up a whole lot of compensation. It's easy to draft a guy if you want to. They seem to be very confident in the ability straight off the bat of Antonio Gibson being able to fit in the system like a glove. And don't get me wrong, I do think that Antonio Gibson should fit the Patriots system very, very well under Alex Van Pelt. But again, if he doesn't, you're signing him to this big 3-year contract. Now, again, they could have void years in this. They could have a void year after 2 years. They could have a void year after 1 year. At this current time, we don't have those contract details. What we do know, though, is that the 3-year deal is going to be worth $11.2 million. The deal can be worth up to $17.2 million through incentives. So Bill Belichick might not be here, but it's very clear that with the guys that are bringing in, they are still going to make it heavily incentive-based, but while still respecting the overall contract. If you think about it, again, we don't know the year-to-year breakdown, but that's still averaging less than $4 million per year. Again, you have to understand is that he's not this big household name in the NFL. He's not Saquon. He's not Tony Pollard. He's not Derrick Henry, but he's not also your no names that are going to come in and be a camp body. This 3-year contract, along with kind of the household name that Antonio Gibson is, should pretty much solidify that as long as he doesn't get injured or just totally crap the bag in training camp, he's going to be a part of this team in 2024 and likely beyond. I think the idea of the Patriots signing another bell cow running back, another elite running back to put behind Ramondre, to me, never made sense. That's why I never talked about signing Saquon Barkley. While it would be cool, I don't think it made sense after the comments that Ramondre Stevenson recently came out and said, basically saying that he wants to be a bell cow running back to a team. He even said that Ezekiel Elliott feels the same way, that he doesn't want to have to split the reps with a guy. And knowing that he had to do that last year, knowing that he probably wasn't too happy with doing so, even though he became friends with Ezekiel Elliott, I think if the Patriots want to think long-term with Ramondre Stevenson, then they needed to find a guy that wasn't going to have to compete with him, that wasn't ultimately going to take his spot. And Antonio Gibson isn't going to do that. I think that there is a very specific role for Gibson that isn't taking snaps away from Ramondre Stevenson. Now, look, at the end of the day, Gibson is still going to get time on the ground. But what's not going to happen is that one drive it's going to be Gibson. One drive it's going to be Mondre. One time it's Gibson. One time it's Mondre. I really think that Gibson is going to come in and be more of a change of pace running back, a guy who's also going to give you some depth, but not just that. He's going to come in and he's going to be your third down back. Ramondre Stevenson is very underrated in terms of his receiving ability, but that's not his bread and butter. That's not what you want him doing, 10 times a game. Antonio Gibson, on the other hand, that's a guy that, you know what, if he has to receive the ball 10 times a game, then ideally that's not the game plan and something probably went wrong, but he can still do it. He comes in and he's going to serve the question that we have been asking for years, and that is who is going to replace the third down receiving back James White role, something the Patriots have tried to find, but over the last several years have not been able to do so. I think Gibson will come in and be a security blanket while also helping out the Patriots overall receive. With this move, I don't say, wow, we just significantly got better. I mean, defensive coordinators should be up at night being scared to play the Patriots now. But what I am saying is, you know what? We now have good depth, but not just that. We also have a role filled that we've been asking ourselves and wondering who is going to be filling this. And that is that receiving backfill. Now, in terms of his durability, he has been able to stay fairly healthy throughout his entire career. He was originally a third-round pick by the Commanders just back in the 2020 draft. He's also only 25 years old, so he is still very young. He's very much in his prime. And I also think that he is a little bit bigger than a lot of people expect. If you go up here, you can see he's 6'2", 220 pounds, which is bigger than Ramondre. I think a lot of people see him and they're like, oh, yeah, this guy looks smaller. And then you look at his height and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. He's actually a lot bigger than I originally thought. But he has been able to stay healthy throughout the majority of his career, right? He played in 16 games this past year, played in 15 games the year prior, 16 games in 2021, and 14 games in his rookie season. So has he played a full season? No. He's always missed a game or two, but he's only always missed a game or two. This past season, in terms of his grading, wasn't the best, but it also wasn't terrible. It was a disappointment coming off of his 2022 season, which we will talk about here in just a minute. But in 2023, he put up an overall grade of 66.6, a rushing grade of 68.4, and a receiving grade of 64.5. In terms of rushing, he had 65 carries, 265 yards, one rushing touchdown, was averaging 4.1 yards per attempt. He had 4 fumbles. He had 16 missed tackles and then was averaging 3.5 yards after contact per attempt with 5 explosive runs. And explosive runs are considered 10 plus yards or more. Keep in mind, when talking about him, when talking about these statistics, he was also running behind a Washington Commanders offensive line, which you think the Patriots is bad. You should check out the Washington Commanders. But in terms of receiving, in this past season, he was targeted 57 times, 48 receptions, 389 yards, receiving 2 touchdowns, and having 4 total drops. He's going to be a guy that comes in and he's going to be explosive, which the Patriots offense does need guys who are going to be explosive. The concerns for me are his consistency. He's not consistent, but also the issues holding on to the ball. Like I said, this past year, 4 fumbles alone, also had 4 drops in the receiving game. A guy that, like I said, all comes back to having to be a little bit more consistent and a little bit more reliable, which we do know the Patriots are going to plug into it. Now, like I mentioned, in 2022 was one of his better seasons, and there was a lot of hype going around him after that 2022 year, just hoping that he could take on a bigger role and help the Commanders kind of progress throughout the funk that they've been in throughout, well, kind of forever, if you really think about it. But this past year, or not this past year, but in 2022, put up an overall grade of 76.3, a rushing grade of 70.9, and a receiving grade, an elite receiving grade of 80.5. He had 149 carries for 546 yards, 3 touchdowns, was averaging 3.7 yards per attempt, which is actually the worst in his career. He never averaged worse than 4 yards per carry other than this 2022 season, but had 1 fumble, 13 missed tackles, 2.5 yards after contact per attempt, and 11 explosive runs, which again is 10 or yards more per run. In the receiving game, he put up 57 targets, 46 receptions, 353 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and 3 drops. Little interesting fact, too, is that throughout his NFL career so far, he has never been targeted, has never put up less than 35 receptions per season, just to kind of go back and dictate just how big he is in the receiving game. Look, the Patriots, they needed bodies at running back. It can't just be Ramondre, who's also coming off of a really plagued injury-prone season this past year in 2023. If you were telling me that Antonio Gibson was going to come in and be the lone main Patriots running back for the season, okay, then I would be worried. But that's not what this situation is. I'm not saying that this is an A or an A+, but I also don't think that this is an F signing. This isn't a C signing. I would say it's a middle of the pack signing to where you go probably around a B. That's where I would overall grade this signing. But as always, I'm going to kick it to you guys. What do you think about this? Are you a fan of it? Are you not a fan of it? Let me know in the comment section below. Remember to leave a big like on this video and, of course, subscribe to the channel for all of your New England Patriots news. As always, though, appreciate you guys for watching. And never forget, go Pats.